Over in the US, the Republican convention is underway. This is where Donald Trump will be officially nominated as their presidential candidate. He's been speaking to a small crowd of delegates in North Carolina, where he's told them that the only way he will lose the US election in November is if this is a rigged election.
He's concerned about voter fraud linked to postal voting. Mr. Trump also set out his successes and stressed how important his re-election is for the country.
We have to win. This is the most important election in the history of our country. This is the most, for a long period of time, I would say, well, 2016, how special was that evening? Was that one of the great? That was one of the great evenings. But we have to be very, very careful, and we have to win. Our country is counting on it.
Well, Erol Morkoc is a spokesman for Republican Overseas UK, currently in Atlanta, Georgia. Good morning. Do you get the sense, good evening over there, do you get the sense that he's kind of the underdog once again, even though he is the incumbent in this particular campaign?
Well, I think definitely Donald Trump and his entire, mantra is punching up as an underdog. So whether or not he's actually viewed as an underdog, considering that we believe in a strong silent majority that will be silenced, is different than running a campaign that's going to sort of, corridor those feelings where they might be more receptive. So definitely, that's what I would say about that.
He's really building on this narrative, isn't he, that if he loses the election, it will be by voter fraud. Is it inconceivable to him and his supporters that it might simply be that more Americans want someone else?
Oh, no, that wouldn't be inconceivable. And if this was a free and fair election that had no problems, we would, of course, respect any sort of election that comes along. But I think there's a huge difference between the tried and true absentee process that's vetted and works. There's a very big difference between people who have, started like Nevada, who are 90 days out from election, have completely upended their political election protocol. And that chaos is coming from the fact not about the post office or fraud, but this with the post office, but they're sending ballots to unverified voter rolls. We've talked to voters this week who've received 3 different ballots for women at her address, people who've never lived there. So promoting the absentee process and a tried and true strategy that's going to keep chaos out of the election is important, because as the president, he has a fiduciary and executive responsibility to the taxpayers to make sure that this election is free and fair, and to the world, because the American election is so paramount to global diplomacy.
Yeah, I should say that the head of the Federal Electoral Commission has said that there is no basis for the conspiracy theory that voting by mail causes fraud. None. So that is their answer to this.
Well, we certainly don't believe that the absentee process would lead to fraud. But when you have, for example, the Postal Service Union, who is going to be handling this, endorsing Joe Biden, and when you have these sort of facts that you can't deny, where 117% of Los Angeles has been sent ballots, I mean, it's certainly ripe for fraud, and especially when this election is down to the wire, 80,000 votes in some states, a little bit of misdirection, a little bit of confusion, just the right kind of fraud, and you could have a very different election. And Donald Trump doesn't want to have an election that's contested, and that's why he's going to win in an absolute landslide come November 3, especially after this just resounding opening night for the RNC, where they took a message of unity and hope, and they pressed it. The utopia of the past, where the Democrats and Republicans concurred on the general direction of the country, but disagreed on how to get there, has changed. It's morphed into a current situation that the Democrat Party is saying for looting and violence and intimidation, where we stand for family, small business, and educating our youth. And Beijing Biden doesn't have the best interests of the American people at heart, and their willingness to oppose the president every turn is being rejected by the moderate voter, the suburbanite people who are taxpayers, property owners, who are decent, family-based, hardworking citizens who want to see their kids back in school. So I think that you're going to have just the president protecting the election and also looking to bring in new voters. And we want everybody to vote. That's the biggest thing that we have. We have a Get Out to Vote campaign. We knocked on 1 million doors during the DNC, and we plan to knock on 1 million more doors, because our supporters actually support our president. So all of this is just defending the republic.
Errol, it's Patrick here. I lived in the States for a few years, and I find it really interesting, for a Republican talking about trying to get the vote out. I mean, traditionally, it's been Democrats who've been trying to get people to vote, and the narrative over there has kind of been Republicans and Republican states making it more difficult for new voters to register because they fear that those guys are going to be Democrats.
Well, that's a narrative that perhaps leftist fan fiction likes to push, that for some reason we're into voter suppression. I think the big differences there is that our voters actually come out and vote. We don't have to change the voting age to get children out to vote. We don't have to allow convicted felons with violent criminal histories who are locked in jail for brutal murders to vote. We don't need to reach out to these traditionally, perhaps undervoting, especially like the youth population. So the Democrat Party has a maybe greater vested interest in bringing in new voters because the people who support them simply don't come out to vote. And we can't help that our voters are keen and willing and eager to get out and vote. But we've never once been in the way of voting or trying to take away anybody's right to vote. That's the antithesis of the Republican Party. It's a party of unity, a party where if you have patriotism in your heart, there's no room for prejudice.
It's a party. It may be a party of unity, but it's not a country of unity at the moment. It feels like a very febrile atmosphere in the United States, and that perhaps it's more divided than when President Trump first came into office in 2016. Do you think that's something he can be proud of?
Well, I don't think it's more divided. I would say that the division is, as Donald Trump says, without President Obama, we never would have had a President Trump. The division has been building, over the last, let's say, 40 or 50 years, where we've had, Democrats and Republicans who seem to, be willing to do everything from lie about WMDs to sign unfavorable trade agreements. So no, I don't think that it's exactly fair to say that's Donald Trump's purview. It's been a much more egalitarian message than perhaps is being taken away on that aspect, I would argue.
Well, we should say that there are accusations of inaccuracies by claims on both sides, of course. Thank you very much for your time. Erol Morkoc, a spokesperson for Republican Overseas UK, the Republican Convention on